When you think about the biggest stories in biology, what comes to mind? For me, it has to be our own story. The story of how life went from being incredibly simple to, well, to us. And it's a story we thought we had all figured out. But it turns out stunning new evidence is rewriting the very first chapters, challenging pretty much everything we thought we knew.
So, that's the big question, right? For billions of years, life on Earth was just these simple, single-celled organisms hanging out. And then, something happened. It's like a switch was flipped, and suddenly the path to complex life, the plants, animals, fungi, everything, began. But when and how did that monumental leap actually happen? Okay, so meet the star of our show, the eukaryotic cell. This little guy is the blueprint for you, for me, and for every complex organism on the planet. I mean, just look at it. It's like a tiny, bustling city with a central command center, power plants, shipping networks, the whole shebang. But this city definitely did not appear overnight.
To really get what a huge leap this was, you have to understand the fundamental divide in life on Earth. It's basically split into two major teams, and knowing the difference between them is the key to this entire story.
So on one team, you've got the originals, the OGs, the prokaryotes. Think bacteria. They're tiny, they're tough, and they've been running the planet for about 4 billion years. Their setup is super simple, basically a bag with some DNA just floating around inside. Then you have the newcomers, us, the eukaryotes. Our DNA is all neatly tucked away in a nucleus, and we have all these specialized little compartments called organelles doing specific jobs. So the billion-dollar question is, how do you get from the simple guy on the left to the complex city on the right?
For decades, the answer seemed to circle around one specific, game-changing event. But here's the thing, that explanation created this massive chicken and egg problem that has kept scientists scratching their heads for a very long time.
And here it is, the mitochondrion. I bet you remember this one from high school biology as the powerhouse of the cell. And it absolutely is. It takes fuel, like sugar, and turns it into ATP, which is the chemical energy that powers literally everything a complex cell needs to do. It's the engine.
But here's the really wild part about mitochondria. The story goes that they weren't always part of our cells. Nope, they were once free-living bacteria that billions of years ago got swallowed up by another, bigger cell. But instead of being digested, they just stuck around and formed this incredible partnership that changed life forever. And this brings us right to the heart of the debate. So which came first? Was the arrival of this powerhouse bacterium the huge energy boost needed to kickstart the whole evolution of complexity? Or was the cell already getting pretty complex on its own and only later picked up mitochondria to power the sophisticated machinery it had already built? Was it the cause, or was it the effect? So how in the world do you solve a billion-year-old mystery like this? It's not like you can hop in a time machine, but scientists have the next best thing, a way to read the history that's written in the DNA of every living thing on Earth today. It's a technique called the molecular clock, and the idea behind it is pretty brilliant. See, genes change or mutate over millions of years at a relatively predictable rate. So by comparing the same gene across different species, you can count up the differences and basically wind the clock backward to figure out when they last shared a common ancestor. It's kind of like forensic genetics for deep time.
And here's how they pulled it off. Researchers gathered genetic data from hundreds of different species, everything from tiny amoebas all the way to us. They used powerful computers to compare all those genetic sequences, and then they cross-referenced it with the fossil record to build this new, incredibly detailed tree of life. From there, they could trace the genes for all our complex features back through time to see when they really first showed up. So after all that incredible work, what did the genetic clock actually reveal? Well, the answer was genuinely astonishing. It's not an exaggeration to say it's completely reshaping our understanding of early life.
1 billion years. That's how much earlier the journey to complexity began than many scientists had thought. This wasn't a sudden revolution at all. It was a long, slow-burning fuse, lit way, way earlier in Earth's history than we ever imagined.
Let's just walk through this new timeline because it's amazing. The evidence now shows that around 3 billion years ago, the very first pieces were already falling into place. Genes for a basic internal skeleton and the beginnings of a nucleus. Then, over the next several hundred million years, our ancient ancestors slowly added more features, like complex internal membranes. And the mitochondria, get this, they're late to the party. They don't show up until around 2.2 billion years ago, right around the time the planet's atmosphere was getting pumped full of oxygen.
So, this all leads to a new model with a really simple, memorable name, CALM. It stands for Complex Archaeon, Late Mitochondrion. In other words, the host cell, one of those ancient organisms called an archaeon, was already well on its way to becoming complex before the powerhouse mitochondrion ever entered the picture.
Okay, so what does this all mean for how we view the history of life on this planet? Well, it fundamentally changes the entire narrative we've been telling ourselves for decades.
So why does this matter so much? Well, for one, it tells us that the evolution of complexity wasn't some lightning strike, some lucky accident. It was a slow burn, a gradual buildup of new features over a vast amount of time. The cell was already drafting its complexity plans long before the big power plants, the mitochondria, came online. And that oxygen-rich environment, it was more like rocket fuel for a vehicle that was already built and moving. It provided a huge boost, for sure, but it wasn't the spark that started the engine.
And it's just so important to recognize how we got this new picture. This wasn't one person in a lab having a eureka moment. It was a massive collaboration, bringing together paleontologists studying ancient fossils, phylogeneticists building family trees of life, and molecular biologists who understand what genes actually do. It's a perfect example of how modern science really works.
So we'll leave you with this thought. If a story as fundamental as our own cellular origins could be so wrong for so long, what other long-held facts about evolution are just waiting for a closer look? The book of life is still being written, and it seems there are always surprising new chapters left to discover. Makes you wonder, doesn't it?